Alleged victim 2 in this case, another person claiming she was coerced into prolonged episodes at Sean Diddy Combs' request, but we also heard the defense grill the woman who claims Combs dangled her off of a 17-story balcony. And also, the judge got quite angry at the rap mogul for the way he was looking at the jurors.
So how do you go in the direction of like moving on and shit like that, or you like just like have me just keep moving? Ain't no threat, I'm just being clear. I can't do this shit with you every time you get upset.
Things just took a whole different angle in the never-ending feud between 50 Cent and Diddy. And this time, Diddy has completely lost it after shocking testimony from 50 Cent's baby mama revealed disturbing allegations that no one saw coming. Rumors are swirling that this could be the final nail in the coffin for the bad boy mogul, and 50 Cent isn't staying quiet either, posting cryptic messages and laughing emojis that fans say are direct shots. But here's the twist. Some insiders claim this may all be part of a bigger setup. Is 50 orchestrating something massive behind the scenes? And is Diddy being pushed over the edge by more than just legal trouble? Something's not adding up. And we've got receipts. But hey, before we dive in, hit that subscribe button. What we're about to uncover is just the beginning. This didn't come out of nowhere. The drama between Diddy and 50 Cent had been brewing for years. And now it's all spilling out. What most people saw were little jokes on social media, a few shady posts, a few interviews with slick comments. But behind the scenes, there was a cold war going on between 50 Cent and Diddy, and only a few people knew how deep it really went.
A beef between two titans of the New York music scene hits the trafficking and racketeering trial of Sean Diddy Combs. Why 50 Cent was brought up this week during emotional witness testimony. Combs and 50, they've been at odds for a long time. And now, one of them's facing the possibility of spending the rest of their life in federal prison, and the other is not holding back or hiding the apparent joy they find in that possibility happening with a guilty verdict.
It all started back in the early 2000s. Both 50 Cent and Diddy were at the top of their game. 50 had already made his mark in music, but now he was turning into a businessman. Effin' Vodka, G-Unit Clothing, his headphones line, and of course, the hit show Power. Diddy was still running Bad Boy, pushing Ciroc everywhere, and calling himself Love. But even though they were both making moves, they were never on the same page. According to someone close to the situation, 50 and Diddy were once in talks about a business deal. Diddy allegedly wanted 50 to invest in a secret project, something digital, something next level. But 50 backed out. He walked away from the deal and supposedly told people, "That guy's energy ain't right." That's when the quiet tension started. Not long after, 50 began taking shots. He mocked Ciroc, called it a fruity drink, and hinted that Diddy's parties had weird energy. At the time, people thought he was just being funny, but those close to him say it was personal, that he'd seen things he didn't want to be part of.
I took a pill, but it was for me to perform better. For her to remember, buddy.
I didn't give her a drink so she forget what the happened.
I didn't do nothing Puffy did.
Yes, I took the drinks. I gave me the drug to perform.
Yeah, no, it was just so excitement. There's so much excitement that there was no reason for me to put something in our drink. I need you to remember.
So she can remember and possibly love me for that.
Diddy didn't respond directly, but soon after, 50's business deals started getting messy. Some say Diddy used his connections to block 50 from certain media platforms. Other sources claim brand partners were suddenly backing out of 50's projects with no explanation. This wasn't just rap beef anymore, it was business warfare. Around this time, a few people close to both Diddy and 50 started going silent. A party promoter in Atlanta, someone who had worked events for both camps, suddenly vanished from the scene. Another woman who was once seen at both men's events allegedly stopped talking and moved out of LA. Was it just business, or was something being hidden? Then came 2017. A rumor spread that there was footage from one of Diddy's private mansion parties. Footage that showed things no one wanted to admit ever happened. Nothing was confirmed. No video ever surfaced. But the whispers wouldn't stop. And guess who kept fueling the fire? 50 Cent. He started reposting stories about lawsuits connected to Diddy. He even mocked Diddy's arrest on Instagram.
I have a lot of fun.
Here I am keeping good company with the Drew Barrymore show, and I don't have 1,000 bottles of lube at the house.
I'm not panicking, they are.
50 referring to the over 1,000 bottles of lube and baby oil found when the feds raided Diddy's home in March. One of many details revealed in his now unsealed indictment, which laid out the charges for his arrest.
Fans thought he was trolling, but in reality, it looks like he was warming up for something big. Now, fast forward to today. In court, with Diddy snapping and 50's baby mama dropping real accusations, suddenly, everything from the past is starting to make sense. The shady deals, the blocked projects, the silence from people who used to talk, all the pieces are lining up. This wasn't just random beef, this was a war that had been going on in silence for over 10 years. Now coming back to the courtroom details, the new documents identified the witness as Jane Doe, but multiple sources inside and outside the trial have just confirmed it was allegedly Daphne Joy, 50 Cent's former partner and mother of his child. Her appearance in court wasn't leaked beforehand. No reporters expected it, and it clearly wasn't something Diddy's team had fully prepared for. Daphne started by revealing everything about her relationship with Diddy before things took a darker turn.
Very nice things about him, that he was really sweet. They went on a yacht, they had drinks, they were flirty together, and then when the two exchanged numbers, that's when the two began calling each other Bert and Ernie. And so even while she's on the stand describing her relationship with Sean Combs, she really seemed kind of like, oh, I was head over heels in love with him. We said love you very quickly in the relationship, and she was saying that their relationship for the most part was pretty private, and even as far as her posting him on social media, that she only posted him about maybe once. But I thought what was also interesting is that Diddy had notably given her a lot of money at times, and so money to either pay for her rent, money to fly out to go see him, just a lot of money that was that she was getting from Sean Combs. Jane had explained that Diddy was larger than life, he was super charming, he was immediately immersed in conversations with her, and that their first date lasted a long period of time. It lasted 5 days. She said on that first date she had told Diddy about the relationship she was in with someone who was close to Diddy, and also kind of explained her child's father's relationship and that the two don't necessarily get along, and Diddy said that he didn't mind that.
She later gave a detailed explanation about a system that was there to control, isolate, and silence women, especially those already within the industry ecosystem. The people around Diddy, she said, weren't random associates. They had roles. They had rules. According to her testimony, many of the alleged incidents took place at properties owned or rented by Diddy or his affiliates. She described industry retreats in gated mansions where phones were confiscated at the entrance. NDAs were enforced at the door. The invite list was curated, not just for clout, but for control. She explained how she was invited under professional pretenses, branding deals, content pitches, private dinners, only to be cornered into situations she had not agreed to. Daphne stated that after her first few encounters, she tried distancing herself, but according to her, the tone changed when she pulled away. She was allegedly told through intermediaries that she was already in too deep. She claimed she was reminded of the NDAs she had signed. She began noticing people watching her movements. She claimed she was told that going public would create legal consequences, and that people bigger than Diddy were involved in keeping things contained. She mentioned one specific weekend in Miami, where she said she was summoned to a hotel under the pretense of a private branding dinner. When she arrived, the room was already arranged. Music was playing. People were already present. She said she was told to relax, but what happened next she described as a violation. No cameras, no messages, and no formal record of what took place. Only the memory and the immediate pressure to remain silent. Her documents included text confirmations from staff about car pickups and arrival times. She listed names of people who were present at specific locations and submitted timestamps of calendar invites that backed her claims.
Told the jury that whenever she tried to resist having sex with other men, that Sean Combs sort of had a pattern of behavior that included things like persistency and love bombing. At this point, the jury has seen a lot of text messages between Jane and Sean Combs. One where Jane says, "I'm not trying to have sex with strangers to fulfill your fetishes," and Combs tells her, "You got it all wrong." Jane says she felt obligated to participate justified in those hotel nights because Combs was paying her $10,000 a month rent. She says he still is to this day. And the jury also saw a text where she says, quote, threatening me with the roof over my head ever since I got here. She also sent another message at one point saying, I know I was consenting like you said in the videos. I don't look like I didn't want to be there.
What stood out most in her testimony wasn't just her own story. It was the way she implicated others, dancers, assistants, stylists, who she said had witnessed similar things, or worse. 2 women, she claimed, had documented similar patterns. One of them allegedly recorded part of a gathering using a backup phone. That footage, she said, was later destroyed after what she described as a private payout. She would not confirm their names, but told the court their identities could be verified if needed. She also described being contacted by a private investigator who warned her she was being flagged by people close to Diddy's legal team. She began noticing parked vehicles near her home. She limited her appearances. She said she stayed quiet for 2 years not because she wanted to, but because she felt she had no choice. Now, the courtroom remained controlled until the second half of her statement was read aloud. That's when Diddy reacted. As court officials read direct excerpts from her sworn testimony, he shook his head. He whispered to his lawyers. Then, as a specific reference was made to the Miami hotel incident, he stood up and hit the table with his hand, hard enough to draw a warning from the judge. His legal team tried to contain him. He refused to sit down. He said something loud enough that it disrupted the session. The judge immediately ordered a recess and security was moved closer to the bench. It wasn't the reaction that raised concern. It was who he reacted to.
Somebody said 50 ain't never been this quiet ever. Details of it talking about that Diddy was giving her $10K a month.
What?
Diddy was literally paying for her lifestyle. She ended up admitting between the $10K a month and child support. That's the money she was getting.
What?
That was the only money she was making.
Wait. Child support from 50?
From 50. She was saying how there was one point where her and Diddy weren't in the best of graces.
Yeah.
And that she suggested that they have a real big have a great party where Diddy can pick the top 3 guys.
Until that moment, Diddy had remained composed during earlier witness statements. But this time, his behavior was different. Legal analysts watching the trial pointed out that when a defendant reacts aggressively to a protected witness, especially one with personal ties to the case, it can shift the court's tone entirely. It also raises questions about what else might be true and who else might be watching. Daphne left the courtroom escorted by security. She did not speak to the media. Lawyers familiar with the case say that within 48 hours of her testimony, 2 different women who were previously silent reached out to the prosecution. One of them was reportedly part of a high-profile 2019 tour. The other had previously signed a confidentiality agreement after a settlement tied to a private birthday weekend hosted by someone inside Diddy's circle. Neither has officially been added to the witness list, but both, according to internal notes, have material evidence, messages, audio recordings, location logs. And possibly one has access to security footage from a house in the hills that was once used for content shoots and influencer deals. According to the woman, what was filmed there wasn't what people were told it was. That's the core of what's developing now, not just individual accusations, but a structure. An environment where non-disclosure agreements weren't just a formality. They were enforcement tools. And based on what's emerging, Diddy wasn't alone. There were drivers, coordinators, guest managers, even private security teams that allegedly knew what to look away from or what to delete. Sources close to the case claim that some of the properties tied to these incidents had on-site surveillance controlled remotely. But the footage wasn't routed to external services. It was stored internally, often overwritten every 48 hours unless manually preserved. Which means unless someone saved it, a lot of potential proof is already gone, but one piece might still exist. According to court memos, a laptop and encrypted drive were seized from a Miami property during a civil raid months before the trial began. At the time, it was tied to a separate financial investigation. But now, prosecutors believe that drive may contain non-financial media files. backups from security systems, internal photos, or messages between house staff and handlers. The files are locked, the devices were password protected, and legal teams are still arguing about admissibility. But if access is granted and relevant media is confirmed, that alone could reopen parts of the case that had already been closed. For years, loyalty was bought, not demanded, and when people broke ranks, the strategy wasn't to fight them, it was to bury them in paperwork. NDAs, cease and desist letters, threats of defamation suits, and whispered reminders about who had the best lawyers in the room. And then there's the question of handlers, people whose jobs weren't tied to music or events at all, but who existed only to manage guests. At least 2 of these handlers, named off-record in court memos, allegedly worked across properties: Miami, LA, New York. Their job wasn't to entertain. It was to make sure rules were followed. Phones were handed over, doors stayed locked, anyone who resisted, escorted out, or never invited again. Now, investigators are trying to determine if these handlers were hired directly or subcontracted through other agencies. Because if they were on payroll and they knew what was happening, it changes the legal exposure dramatically. And this is where the real problem begins for Diddy and his legal team. If this escalates into a conspiracy case, meaning multiple people knowingly operated under a system meant to protect abuse or intimidation, it's no longer just about individual accusations. It becomes racketeering-level territory, which means prison time isn't just possible, it's probable. For now, much of this evidence is still under seal. Media outlets are running theories. Some are calling it a takedown, others a long overdue reckoning. But inside legal circles, the conversations are turning technical. Chains of custody, surveillance metadata, communication logs between staff members that were previously considered routine. Now they're being treated as evidence. If one of those women comes forward publicly, or if the files from that seized hard drive become accessible, this case will expand fast. Not into gossip territory, but into criminal. And here's the wild part. There are already signs that someone tried to preempt this. A small PR firm based in LA reportedly received a cease and desist for mentioning Diddy's name in association with an unnamed Content House investigation. The complaint? Defamation? The problem? The firm hadn't publicly posted anything yet. The letter was sent before their draft report was finalized. The only way that's possible is if someone inside the firm leaked internally, and that leak was being monitored. Which suggests that while the public is just starting to see the cracks, the people involved already know what's coming. By the time the courtroom reached day 20, the tone had shifted from defensive to destabilized. And at the center of that pattern was one name that reemerged with weight: Cassie. Her civil lawsuit was one of the first to gain mainstream attention, but it was also the one that many people wrongly assumed had been handled when a settlement was reached in late 2023. What most people didn't realize then, and are beginning to now, is that Cassie's case laid the blueprint for what's now unfolding inside the courtroom. Legal analysts confirmed that certain evidence from Cassie's case, which had originally been sealed under the terms of the private agreement, is now being reconsidered under new parameters.
Ventura says she endured for years. Ventura telling jurors, quote, "He would bash my head, knock me over, drag me, kick me, stomp me in the head when I was down." She also got into the nature of those so-called freak-offs, saying that they involved hiring an escort and they performed under the direction of Combs, saying that they happened so frequently it eventually became a job for her to set them up. Ventura said she did not feel she had much of a choice but to participate, that she feared that Combs would retaliate or potentially blackmail her if she did not. And she's had at times to she's taken deep breaths, pausing her testimony, Combs appearing to be listening pretty passively with his hands in his lap at the defense table there. Now remember, this is the first time that they are seeing each other face to face since 2018. You can imagine that emotions are very high in the courtroom right now. And this is expected to be a very lengthy testimony. Prosecutors bracing the courtroom for what's to come as she continues to testify, including videos of these alleged freak-offs. Diane?
And Eva, Cassie's expected to face a lot of questions.
Why? Because multiple testimonies in the current trial closely mirror elements of her original lawsuit. Same venues, same patterns, same people. Cassie described being controlled, emotionally, physically, and financially. Her complaint cited surveillance, coercion, and isolation. She alleged that she was locked in luxury, promised career opportunities while being stripped of agency. That wasn't just a one-off allegation. It now looks more like a documented model. One of the prosecution's key witnesses referenced an event from 2017, a private weekend held at a Beverly Hills compound that matched a specific date Cassie had mentioned in her complaint. Different woman, same house, same alleged rules, phones collected, NDAs signed, women directed into specific guest suites. These aren't coincidences. This is a pattern. And now the prosecution is petitioning to use portions of Cassie's case as contextual evidence, arguing that what happened to her wasn't isolated. It was a precursor. If the motion is accepted, parts of her original lawsuit, names, dates, message logs, could become part of the official trial record. And that would be devastating for the defense. Diddy's legal team predictably objected. Their stance? The Cassie case was settled. It's closed. But the prosecution's position is clear. Once a pattern is established, especially if it's echoed by multiple independent witnesses, settlement privacy no longer shields repeat behavior from scrutiny. Also worth noting, on day 20, a digital forensics expert was called in by the prosecution. Their job was to confirm the metadata behind a series of image backups and device logs that allegedly tied Diddy and his team to several dates referenced not only in the current trial, but also in Cassie's civil complaint. These weren't leaked photos or speculative screenshots. These were official digital logs pulled from seized devices that aligned with locations and timestamps Cassie had documented years ago.
Because she is a victim. She is a victim. She has put herself out there and saying that she survived these horrific instances of rape, of other assaultive behaviors, some of which we've seen evidence of on that videotape that CNN exclusively obtained and then broadcast, and thank goodness for that. And so with the defense trying to go down this road, trying to attack her therapy, the government's going to get right back up there and say, well, the only reason she needed to go to therapy and seek EMDR and the other types of therapy was because of the actions of your client, Combs' attorney team. So they're going to go right back at it and say that had she not been so brutally traumatized, she wouldn't have had to seek therapy, and that's a good thing. And certainly anybody on that jury who's ever been to therapy or knows anything about it, they're going to be thinking about how Cassie Ventura could be being traumatized right now, again, in having to relive all of the various questioning for days from both sides. So you're right, Brianna. This is a slippery slope that the defense team is on right now with her.
And then there's the security contractor. An off-duty former bodyguard, brought in under subpoena, stated that Cassie wasn't just accompanied on tour, she was watched. The witness stated he was instructed never to allow her to leave venues alone, that if she disappeared for more than an hour, someone had to check on her. This was never presented in Cassie's original case. Now it's out. The courtroom didn't erupt, but the judge took notice. And more importantly, so did the jury. What's quietly happening here is a legal repositioning. What once seemed like a string of isolated civil disputes is now being framed as a coordinated abuse of power. And Cassie's lawsuit is turning from a closed tab to an active reference point, not because it started the fire, but because it showed everyone where the smoke was coming from. What's next? If prosecutors succeed in folding parts of Cassie's original claims into this trial as corroborating context, the public may hear details that were never released, screenshots that were sealed, names that were redacted, audio that was scrubbed from the press, but preserved for court. All of it could become part of a larger argument that this isn't about one relationship gone bad. This is about systemic control masked as celebrity lifestyle. Cassie may never take the stand. She may never appear in person. But her lawsuit and everything it contained has already re-entered the courtroom. And as of day 20, it's doing more damage than anyone expected. And yes, folks, that's it for this video. Do let us know what you think. Is this finally the beginning of the end for Diddy? Was Jane Doe really Daphne Joy? Or is there even more we haven't seen yet? Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop your thoughts in the comments. We're reading all of them. This story's far from over, and trust me, you're gonna want to be here when the next piece drops. Catch you in the next one.